right, so today's agenda is we've already done our introduction, so we are well on our way. We are going to talk a little bit about our concerns, if there are any, because we do a little bit of statistics just to give you a little background. We'll go over the binders in the curriculum, and then I will do a demonstration of 4th and 5th grade. And I picked 4th and 5th grade because that's when you start talking about child abuse, and I think that's probably for the younger kids. The curriculum's probably a little easier to wrap your head around, but when you start talking about child abuse, it gets a little, might be a little more concerning. So I just wanted to make sure that we demonstrate that for you. We'll talk a little bit about tips for delivery, and as of right now, this is sort of also goes as a train the trainer. So if you need to take this back to your parish and train other folks, you can do that. And there's a PowerPoint that's available to you, and we'll just go through that real fast so you can kind of do that if you need to. And then we will definitely have a question and answer period at the end of the day. But like I said, we will try to do some throughout just to make sure there are certain points that everybody is feeling okay with things. All right, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my organization real fast. So my organization is Prevent Child Abuse Delaware. We have been providing leadership on child abuse prevention for almost 40 years. We're almost there. And so we really go out and talk to folks in the community about how to prevent child abuse. So how to strengthen families and communities. We talk to children about child abuse and personal body safety. We train home visitors and foster parents. And I always say, I will train anybody who will listen to me about this topic. Just a little bit about our work around this issue. So a little background about how a curriculum like this came about. So in the early 80s, people started talking about sexual abuse a little bit more open. And if you talk to any survivor of abuse, the theme that you will often hear is, if only somebody told me. If only somebody said this wasn't normal, then maybe things would have been different. So that was sort of in the early 80s, and my organization in 1984 said, okay, we can do this. There were no curriculums to run out and buy, so they created their own curriculum, which was for little kids, pre-K for kindergarten, which is our PA Bear program. And PA Bear is still out there today. He doesn't look a day older, but he is out there, and we still use that program for our pre-K 4 and kindergarten classes. And then we developed programs over the years for the older kids. And we are constantly revising them, looking at best practice, and taking feedback from the folks that we serve. So we were, prior to 2019, and I'll tell you about why that's important, would see about 12,000 kids a year in schools throughout the state. And we're serving mostly, focusing on kindergarten to 4th grade. But in 2018, Delaware passed its own version of Erin's Law. And Erin's Law, the last time I heard, was like in 30 states. And it was campaigned and written and named after Erin Marin, who was an abuse survivor, who said, if kids are given this information, this will help. And so Delaware wrote their own version of Erin's Law, and that went into effect in 2019. So in 2019, it was required that all schools, all public and charter schools in Delaware, have some kind of child abuse prevention education for children pre-K to 6th grade. And so this is good for you folks that are from Delaware, because the kids who are coming to you when you provide these lessons should have already heard some of these messages. You should just be doing a refresher for them, which should hopefully make it easier. So we are currently in 8 districts and 7 charter schools. So we saw over 26,000 kids last year, even with COVID and all the stuff that was happening. And we still try to serve the Catholic and private schools, and that's actually how this relationship started. We did some of our programs in some of the Catholic schools in Newcastle County, and I think that's how Michelle heard about us and how that relationship started. So all that to being said is that we have been doing this for a very long time. We are constantly looking at the research, and you have experts who wrote this curriculum for you. It's not somebody who didn't have experience in this topic. So this is where I will try to repeat what you say. Are there any concerns or fears that you have that you're comfortable sharing? Because there are some of you who were on the uncomfortable side. Yes, ma'am. Right. So this idea of cultural, we need to be sensitive to different cultures, and that question gets brought up a lot, because it's trying to balance what is culturally acceptable and what is not, and so I think that the more diverse your group is in presenting the materials and giving feedback, I think will really be helpful when speaking to children. And I think that that's probably an area that I know that we are constantly trying to think about and look at and make changes to. So if you guys come across something and you're like, just let me know, because I think that would be helpful, and then I would welcome your feedback, and anyone else who has come across some issues around diversity in cultures. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, yes, ma'am. Right, so summarize the question was around making sure that the curriculum is engaging and fun and keeps kids interested. And that is one of the things that you're going to see in just a little while, a big little sign that says have fun, right? Because this is a serious topic, but it doesn't mean it can't be fun, right? Because we're not trying to scare children, around this. We want to give them information just like we give them about wearing a seatbelt or putting their bike helmet on or crossing the street. Like I know when I teach my children to cross the street, it's not a terrible, scary situation. It's just a conversation that we're going to have. And we're going to have it a lot, right? And that's important around this topic as well. And so we're going to talk about throughout the day how to make things engaging. And as much as you might or may not like to hear this, a lot of that comes from your personality, right? What you are comfortable with, what you are good at. As I said, the little kids scare me. I don't like to sing. It's really for their own benefit, not mine. And so I don't sing, when I talk to the kindergartners. And that's okay, but I can do other things to engage them. So it's partly what you're comfortable doing, but to your point, you cannot sit at your desk. See, I'm standing. You cannot sit at your desk and read the script like this and look up once in a while and smile and continue. You can't do that, right? And as teachers of children, you know that that's important. Yes? So the question was, what happens if you're teaching and somebody blurts out or discloses child abuse? And so this is a major fear and concern for every single person who does this lesson. When I have new team members, that's like their first thing. What do we do? So there's a couple of things that is important to think about. The first thing is that you are safe folks for most of these kids, so there is that likelihood of that happening. And that's important that you sort of wrap your head around that and understand that. For my team, when we go in, sometimes children have never seen us before, so it's less likely that kids are going to disclose to us. But when we've been going to the same school for 6 years, they're like, oh, hey, Miss Kelly, how are you? I used to go to the grocery store, and kids would come up to me and be like, oh, look, it's the child abuse lady. Yes, that was my favorite. Hi, yes. I'm the Prevent Child Abuse lady. So when you have that comfort level with kids, it does increase the likelihood. So one of the things that if they do disclose, start talking, lots of times kids don't just blurt out a lot of information. They do give you a second where you can be like, thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate you sharing that information with me. But you know what? I want to make sure that you and I can talk about this in more detail privately. So when we're all done with the lesson, you and I can talk. So as soon as and sometimes, you can sort of see where they're going, and you can just, I know we are taught not to interrupt people, but sometimes we have to. And just be like, you know what, I think, if you really have a sense, you can also say, you know what, I think this is something you and I should, can talk about more privately. So what the messages that you want to give is that you need more time than you have right this second. Not that it's something we can't talk about, because you want to really balance that environment of we can talk about this, but making sure we're doing it safely. So try to put it in the we don't have enough time to really give you the attention that you need, not that we can't talk about it. Does that make sense? Do you feel a little? And to be honest with you, it really doesn't happen too much, because most kids do understand that this is something they should not be telling people, or that's not understand, that's what's in their mind. That they should not be telling people this, they should not be talking about this. And so sometimes they usually just ask a little question that's going to make you go, and then, to sort of test the water thing, and they might ask to talk to you later. Now, they might say, I know somebody, and when they put it out as I know somebody, then that's vague enough, and that just gives you the opportunity to have a conversation. So if a child says, I know somebody who gets hit with a belt and they have bruises all the time, you can say, well, that is unfortunate and sad, and that is not how grown-ups should treat children. And one of the things that you'll incorporate is, your body is as a temple and is sacred, and we want to care for our bodies and respect our bodies, and that's not being respectful. And it's really important that if somebody's being hurt like that, that they tell a safe grown-up. And so you can address it that way and then move on. And then if you feel like you want to follow up it privately, you can do that as well. And we're going to talk a little bit more about just how to handle a disclosure and what you can and cannot say a little bit later, so that we're very clear on that. Questions, thoughts? Yes?
My question covered.
So I'm going to refer that to... Well, Michelle, yep. But I will just say that when we go through the binder, you'll see that there's a parent letter, and that should go out. We very much believe that parents should know about this before it happens, so that they can contact you with questions or concerns. Because sometimes, parents have this, although this should be happening less, because they should be getting this information from the schools, so they should be totally used to having a letter from somebody saying, oh, look, we're going to talk about this. But they're usually, they don't know what you're going to say, and so sometimes that's their question, like, are you going to say penis and vagina? And you're not, don't worry. And we're going to talk about that too. And then did they also, sometimes, which is I think is really important, is if a child has recently disclosed abuse or had a traumatic experience, they really might not want their child, and it might not be in their best interest for their child to participate. So sometimes that is really helpful, the more information you can get from a family. All right. So I'll go through this real fast. For any of you who are just, thinking, this is just a little out of my wheelhouse, this is a little hard for me, we have all done really hard things. And what I always encourage folks to do is to step back and think about a time when they had to do something really hard. And why did you do it? How did you do it? And then what was the outcome? Because 9 times out of 10, when you've done something hard, there was a benefit to it, and you appreciated that you took on a difficult task. And I think that most of you are here because I'm sure all of you are here, because you care about children. And so that could be the basis for your motivation to, really dive into this and give it a try. So I always tell people about 1999, great year, fantastic fashion, big, and we had Britney Spears and some really great, iconic movies. But in 1999, I graduated with my master's. And I had worked, as you in 27 years, I started at Prevent Child Abuse Delaware after I graduated with my bachelor's. And I went back to school to get my master's in education, and I decided to stay at the organization. And after I got my master's and everybody thought I was something special, now remember, I came to Prevent Child Abuse Delaware in 1995 to teach children. I wanted to go into the classrooms, talk to kids. I did groups for kids who were sexually abused. I did groups for kids who were living with substance abusing parents. Yes, but I did not want to talk to any grown-ups. No way, no how, nuh-uh, not doing it. So picture it, 1999, I'm in that great outfit that was back there, and my boss says, well, you know, so-and-so is retiring, so we're going to need you to teach the adults. Now, you can see there are some thoughts that I had. There were definitely tears. I was very angry, and my initial response was, I'm out of here, like, because I can't do this. I have no experience teaching adults. I do not want to teach adults. I love children, and that's what I want to do. So, you know, I was 27-ish, not independently wealthy, and needed to have a job. So this is what I did. I cried some more, and I don't like the saying, you need to pull up your big boy or big girl pants, but, you know, we all know that saying. And, you know, you have to look at things that are hard. You have two options, right? And that's what the jail cell painting is. You can either paint and look at the cell bars, or you can paint or look at the landscape on the outside. And so that's basically what I had to do. I decided that I would at least try teaching grown-ups. How bad could it be? Well, you guys can tell me. And so, you know, it was a very good opportunity. It was probably one of the hardest things, honestly, that I had to do because, like I said, I wanted to work with kids. That was what I knew I wanted to do, you know, since I was little. And so here we are today. So if you are feeling like I'm not sure about that, just sort of think back and reflect on something that was hard to do and really what that outcome is, and find, you know, those strategies that you used to give this a try. So just a little bit about why, you know, Mike talked about this, but sometimes parents will, you know, there's this thought still and about, you know, this is a parent's job. They should be talking to their children about this issue. And they should, and we absolutely encourage that, right? But unfortunately, some people don't because of either their own history, they don't know how, or they just don't think it's their problem. Like, this doesn't happen here, it happens over there. And as Mike said, it happens everywhere. So a statistic to just know and be familiar with is that 1 out of 10 children will be sexually abused by the time they're 18. So for those of you who were in public schools and a public school teacher, your average class is 25 to 30 kids. Last time I was in the classroom. So you're looking at 2, 3, 4 kids statistically in each of your classrooms who will be sexually abused by the time they're 18. Now, surprisingly, this is an improvement. Because when I did this in 2002, I would have told you that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys would be sexually abused by the time they were 18. So we have made improvements, and we will continue to do that. The more that we are having these conversations, the better things will get. But it is important to help people really understand and know that statistic. And there will be people who will tell you that statistic, it's still, sexual abuse in particular, is still underreported. One of the things that I had to do was I went to a conference for folks who treat sex offenders. And there was 2 reasons I did that. The first was they were doing a prevention track. But the second was it is really important to understand why, or try to understand why somebody would hurt children in that way. And there's no known reason how you become a sex offender. There are some different theories, but something stood out. So just like for Mike, you know, he's got his standout moment. I didn't have children yet. I don't even think I was married. So this is prior to 2005. I was sitting in a room, and the person who worked with sex offenders was doing a presentation, and he said, here's a quote from one of my sex offenders. "Show me a child who's not had sex education, and you just gave me my next victim." And that has stuck with me. And I tell that to anybody who will listen to me. Because one of the things that we're not so great at is talking to our kids about their bodies, about sex, about sexuality, until they're the magic age of, 12 or whatever that age is. Unfortunately, that's too late. The average age for sexual abuse is 9, and that's probably a little higher. That's probably a little older than, again, we're using known numbers, right? So we need to be having these conversations with children very, very young. Because unfortunately, sex offenders will use that piece of data to hurt children. Most sex offenders, not all, most sex offenders want children, and I use this word from their perspective, easy targets, right? So that means they want children who are passive, compliant, and uneducated. So as a woman of 2 daughters, it is really important that we don't tell girls to be quiet, to not speak up, and not be assertive, because that makes them vulnerable, right? So you have a sassy little girl like my 10-year-old. I remind myself regularly, I want her to be assertive. I want her to speak up. As much as sometimes that drives me crazy, but that's what I want. Because she does speak up, and she is assertive, and she says what's on her mind, not always in the best way, but she does, and that's going to keep her safer, right? So we want to make sure that kids have information, so that, because sex offenders typically don't just go up to your kids and sexually abuse them. There's a whole process. And one of that process starts with just sort of accidentally touching, and see what the response is. You want your child to say, no, you can't do that, or you shouldn't touch me that way, or you were supposed to ask before you kiss me. And when a sex offender sees that, most of them will be like, oh, okay, you're good. Because I'm sure there's a child over here who won't speak up to me. Or we'll ask some questions, and if you say, or do something, or have a conversation, and the child says, you shouldn't touch anybody's penis, they use that word, then the sex offender says, oh, you're having a lot of conversations. This is not a child that I want to pursue, because it's going to be too hard and too dangerous. Now, that's not for all sex offenders, but that's for a good portion of them. So this is why this education is important. With that also being said, it is also important to know that children are not responsible for protecting themselves, right? That is our job. So one of the other things that we need to be doing is educating ourselves about sex offenders, about how the grooming process works, and be questioning folks as well, and making sure that we're putting safeguards in place so that kids are safe. But giving them information and educating them is just another way to keep them safe, right? It's, as I said before, if you think about how do you taught your children to cross the street? Do you take them to the street, you hold their hands, and you say, okay, we look both ways. If there's no cars coming, we cross the street. Now, we do that when they're 4 or 5, and then do you say, okay, good luck, because we're never having this conversation again, because that was too hard. Do you say that? No. My kids are 14, and my oldest is 14. I'm like, hey, car coming? She's like, oh, yes, I know, right? You get in the car. Everybody buckled? I've been saying that for 14 years. Obviously, they're buckled. But we say it over and over again. And it's the same thing with this message. So they get it at school. Hopefully, they're getting it at church. And then they're going to hopefully get it at home. That's the goal. So that when I say to my children, when they leave my house, and I'm like, okay, and they're like, yes, Mom, no one's supposed to touch my private places. If they do anything that makes me feel uncomfortable, I need to tell somebody. It's the same thing. Are you buckled? Yes. Somebody makes you feel uncomfortable, you tell somebody. It just has to be part of your everyday conversation. And when it is, it's not a big deal for them. It's not a big deal for you. My kids will tell you very happily, easily, well, not my 14-year-old because we're at this point now, but she has a vagina. No one should touch it. They knew that when they were little. Right. And I think you probably know stranger danger. You need to have that conversation just very, lightly with your little kids. Don't go with strangers, but the majority of sexual abuse is committed by somebody the child knows and trusts, because that's how sex offenders do their work. They need to build that relationship, they need to form that trust, and then take advantage of that. Okay, so what this program is, because some folks are a little concerned or confused, or what it's not. So it's not sex education. We are not talking about sex education at all. It is not self-defense. There are some programs, I think there are not so many anymore, that teach kids to karate chop, and they use all these karate kind of moves. That is not effective. That actually has been found to be more dangerous for kids when they try to fight back. So this does not use that approach. It is not scary at all, and it's not harmful. Now, let me just say that. If you follow the script, it's not scary or harmful, okay? If you put some other things in there, then I can't guarantee that it won't be scary or harmful. It is age appropriate. Like I said, we've been doing this for over 30 years. It's all tested. It's child friendly. It's based on best practice. We are constantly looking at the research, and it is effective. And there's research that shows that. Just just for your knowledge, and if anybody has questions, these are some things you can point to. If you want where this came from, I can also give you that information. Research has shown that children do learn the key concepts, and kids that have participated in this program are 6 to 7 times more likely to use the skills. Now, this is in simulated situations, but we hope that it will be generalized into other situations. That when you start this conversation, it will increase parent-child interaction. As Michelle said, there are parent activities that you can send home. That's really important because we want this conversation to continue. Now, sometimes it does promote disclosure, which you want, because if kids are disclosing, right, then the abuse has a shorter duration, which tends to lead to more successful recovery. And the other thing that we really want to focus on is reducing self-blame, because if you've ever talked to a survivor, that's the thing they struggle with the most, is self-image and self-blame. Particularly around any type of abuse, you are pretty much manipulated into thinking it was your fault. I had to beat you because you didn't do what you were supposed to do. I sexually abused you because you wanted it. And so, I call you bad names and stupid because you are. They're manipulated to believe that it is their fault. And so we really want to try to change that for them. So there's no evidence that shows that these programs will increase anxiety. That's always a concern. They're going to be scared. I will tell you that sometimes if children have never had this conversation, they're a little like, but it's not long lasting. It goes away. They are seeing much more anxiety-provoking things on television and the internet than anything you or I are going to say to them. They do not misinterpret appropriate behavior or touches. We are very clear, and there's no evidence that shows that children suddenly think that if you hug them that you're not supposed to be. Now, I have had parents come and talk to me after their little ones have had the class, and sometimes, as a parent, you just can't help how cute your little child's your young kids, they're a little behind it. So sometimes, you pat them on the bottom, and they'll say, "Mom, you're not supposed to do that," And so I do get that feedback that sometimes as a grown up, you're just touching them, or maybe you hug them, and they say, "You're supposed to ask me before you hug me," and that's all good conversation. And that was another one of those things I had to teach my husband. When my oldest was little, he would say, "Give Daddy a kiss." And what do all good 2-year-olds say? No. And then what do all daddies say? "Oh, give Daddy a kiss. Don't you want to give Daddy a kiss?" And then I would have to say, no, we don't do that. Right? She gets to decide who she gives kisses to. And I would say to him, because now if she goes to school or she goes outside and our neighbor says, "Oh, give me a kiss," and you've taught her that she has to, what have we done? So you want to teach kids to be assertive, and do they have the right to decide who touches them, who they give kisses to, and those kinds of things. And then these programs do not cause any sexual problems for children and for adults, right? There's no concerns about that. But what I will tell you is that if a person is sexually abused as a child, they will most likely have issues with sex and sexuality and relationships as adults. All right, best practice. I think that we have talked about this already. You will see that when we go through the curriculum that it is best to do these in 2 sessions if you can, but I know that this was challenging for some of the parishes, so it can be done in 1 session. But best practice shows multiple sessions are better. It gives kids time to think about what you've taught them and to sort of review and ask if they have any questions or concerns, and sometimes to make sure they didn't misinterpret what you said. And then we've talked about the importance of just repeating these and having these conversations over and over again. But as you brought up, the importance of engaging kids, role-playing in practice is the best strategy. So if there is a role play, please do it, because you want kids to practice the skills that you're teaching them. And then also the discussion. This is not, don't read your script, it is a conversation. All right, so I think we talked a little bit about the curriculum creation. So we'll use this time to go through the binder. Okay, so in your binder, if you open it up, you have a little introduction, a little bit about the curriculum itself. And then you have the parent letter, which comes from your parish. So however fits your organization the best. And then we have, so the next section is the opening scripts. So there are 2 scripts that you can choose from, and I'm going to ask Michelle to talk about them in just 1 minute. That you want to make sure that you start with the opening scripts, and then you have the curriculums for each grade, and they're broken down to kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and then 6th through 8th. So there's one curriculum for both grades. So what you'll see is that there's some suggestions about how to, save this, do this activity for the 2nd, for the 5th grade, do this activity for the 4th grade, or break this one up in half. But honestly, if you do the same lesson 2 years in a row, it's not going to hurt anybody. It's just that idea of repetition, and as long as you're engaging, they either will be like, we did this already, or we did this in school, and you can say, that's great, you are now my expert, so you help me. And then in the back, you have resources. So you have the PowerPoints. I should have said that earlier, sorry. So this is the PowerPoint that we're using today, or right now, sorry. And then you will have a copy of the PowerPoint that you can use if you decide to do something like this for folks in your parish. And then there are reporting resources. So there's Delaware. There's the Delaware law, which we'll talk about a little bit later. There's information about how to make a report, and there's information for those of you from Maryland as well about reporting. And then the last page is just a resource sheet with just a few resources to use. But like I said, my card is in the front. So if you have questions, concerns, need some help with something, just really feel free to reach out to me. I will be happy to help you to the best of my ability. All right, Michelle, would you like to talk about the opening prayer?
Well, I'm Michelle Hogan, as I said, and I was working with Colleen and Mike and a group of, I think there were 4 of us who were DREs who worked on this, on the curriculum that Kellie gave us. So I'm so grateful for Kellie, because I think when we reached out, Kellie's like, we don't share our curriculum. So I'm so grateful that there was this partnership that was established, because it is so beneficial for our students. And I can't say enough how, I know we only have 30 hours of education. My kids go to religious ed. And you think, how can we get all of this in? My son is getting ready for his first communion. I know, I'm old to have a 7-year-old. And we took time in my parish, St. Joe's on the Brandywine, last weekend to present the lessons, because it is so important. These lessons are a continuation of the work that we're doing, the faith education that we're doing, because we've taken Kellie's curriculum and we've injected the faith piece to it. So we begin with prayer, we end with prayer. Throughout the curriculum, there are spaces where there's mention of the fact that we are created by God, in the image of God. Our bodies are a temple. We're created to love and to be loved. So that is all included in the curriculum. I know when I presented last weekend, my son and actually his classmates had already heard the same presentation at their school. But they don't go to a Catholic school, so they did not hear the faith piece. So even though he was like, Mom, I just heard that last week. And I said, yes, I know, but you got to hear it in a different lens. And he's like, okay. So it really is so important that they hear in different places, in different settings, from different people. And they hear the importance. So as Kellie mentioned, we created 2 options for kind of an opening. How do we root this? And the first option is to be rooted in Matthew's gospel, where I give you the greatest commandment. Jesus says to love one another as I have loved you. So that's the first one. We talk a little bit about that, set that up, have that gospel passage available, and then have our opening prayer. And then the second one, which I have to confess is my favorite one, really centers around God as relationship and that we're created to be good. And we look at Genesis. And I love that because I love Father Richard Rohr, and he talks about the Trinity, and he talks about how we really are modeled on God, and God is in relationship, and we are in relationship. So it kind of casts off from there. But I have to say, to be in a group of, first graders and through, third graders, and you're talking about the Trinity, they're kind of like, huh? What? But if you have a little fidget spinner, we did one time give out the fidget spinners, but there's a little fidget spinner reference that talks about Trinity, and there's a little, we give you the links to all the description on that. So I am just to wrap it up, I am very grateful to Kellie for letting us add our faith piece to it, because I think it really does add to the information that they are already hearing in their schools, but it gives it a different tone, and I think that's really important because it really does center on our faith. So thank you all for being here today, and especially if you're doing a refresher, thank you. I'm doing a refresher too. I need the refreshers as well, so thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. All right, so see, I told you we get to the have fun, right? So here are some tips when you're thinking about delivering the curriculum. It is very important that you practice. Practice. So sometimes that means you just have to go in a room and talk to yourself. I did that yesterday. Talked to myself for 5 hours. Not quite that long, just kidding. But you do want to practice so that you increase your comfort level, because that's really important. One of the beautiful things about kids is they know what's going on with you. They know when you're not comfortable doing something, and so they're going to pick up on that. And why that's really important for this topic is because people don't talk about this topic to them because it's uncomfortable, and so we really want to try to create a comfort level in our environment so that we can have these conversations, and kids do think it's okay to talk about those things. So I will tell you, I'm going to put my little disclosure out now. When I do the demonstration for you, you're going to see where I'm comfortable and where I'm not, right? So I have been doing this for 27 years. I am very comfortable talking about this. I am not a religious education teacher. I do not talk to children about religion, God, and those kinds of things. So you're going to see how things change as I go through the script. And that's okay. It's okay not to be perfect and not to do things 100% correct. That's okay. Don't have that expectation for yourself, but try to be as comfortable as you can. The beautiful thing about having the opportunity to work with kids over, on a regular basis is that if you realize that you forgot something or you might have said something in a way that you didn't like, you can correct it the next time you see it. You know what? I was thinking about our lesson last time. Let's just go over this thing real quick one more time. And so that's really a great benefit to having that opportunity. If you have some disruptive behaviors, particularly from a child who's not disruptive, just really hone in on that as they're not comfortable. Now, it could be that they've just never heard this before, and that's where their discomfort's coming from, or it could be something else, just to sort of pay attention. All kids, when they misbehave, are trying to tell you something, and part of our job as teachers and caregivers is to try to figure out what they're trying to communicate with us. And again, you want to have fun. This is a serious topic, but it doesn't have to be done like in a super serious way. Have fun, laugh, sing, do these, keep it engaging, keep kids interested. All right, so we're going to talk about what to happen, a little bit more about what happens if a kid discloses abuse. So we talked about what happens if they're, how to handle that if it happens during your lesson, to try to, as soon as you can. Thank you so much for sharing with me. I'd really like to talk to you about this a little bit more. We can do that after our lesson is over. But if you are talking to a child one-on-one and they do disclose abuse to you, these are some tips that are important, right? So I always say, well, what do you think your most important job is if a child discloses abuse to you? Listen. Listen. Very good. Because most people tell me report. Right? Now, I will tell you that's important. But at that moment, your most important job is to listen to the child, okay? Now, the other second most important thing is to the best of your ability to keep a poker face. Because the minute you start showing emotion, which is very hard not to do, having heard, unfortunately, lots of disclosures in my day, but when you start showing emotion, kids will stop talking. So if you get angry, even if you're angry, that they'll still take that personally and they'll shut down. If you get sad, they'll take that. They'll take that. Kids protect the grown-ups that they care about. That's why so many children don't disclose abuse, because they're trying to protect somebody. I have had kids tell me, we can't tell my mom because she cries all the time anyway, right? Because they're trying to protect their mom from being hurt more. Why do kids say, we can't tell my dad? Say it again. Right. Well, my dad will kill him, right? So it's, and that's very, and that is, it is, I'm sure you've seen that with men in your life, not to play stereotypes, because, there is the pit bull mom kind of thing, but, that's a dad's response. Somebody hurts their child, they are, not to look at you, but, or Mike, I'm sure that, there might have been a situation where, you've been in that, something's happened to your child and your instinct is to, and so kids pick up on those things. So we really want to make sure that we try to remain calm and even-keeled so they can just tell you what they want to tell you. So the next important thing is you cannot ask interrogating questions. You might want to, but you cannot. So you need to keep those as open-ended as you can. So tell me what happened. So when did it happen? Where did it happen? And if don't push for a lot of information. You just get what you can just through a very calm, casual conversation, and then make the report. It is not your job to investigate. It's not your job to collect evidence. It's just your job to report suspicion. Another really important thing is do not make promises, right? So don't say, I promise this will never happen to you again, because you can't. So one of the things that if a child discloses abuse to you, to do in your mind is to pat yourself on the back, because kids don't disclose abuse, right? So if you look at sexual abuse, 1 out of 10 children will disclose abuse. 1 out of 10. That means 9 will not. And so if a child is brave enough to tell you, that means they have a relationship with you that they are very comfortable in. And so you don't want to jeopardize that relationship. And so they've learned that adults are not trustworthy, right? Because we all tell kids people love them and are supposed to take care of them. And 9 times out of 10, the person who is hurting them is in this position where they should be loving them. And so they've just learned not to trust adults. So if you make a promise that you can't keep, for that moment, that is just as bad as the abuse that they are suffering. So no promises. You can say thank you. You want to say thank you so much for telling me. You were so brave. I'm going to do what I'll try to help you the best I can. For the older kids, I always say to them, I need to tell somebody else, because again, that's that trust. They'll be upset about it. No, please don't tell anybody else. I don't want to get so-and-so in trouble. And you say, I understand, but my job is to make sure that you're safe and that I have to tell somebody else so that we can get somebody the help that they need.